Okay, we just finished the marathon reveal. I'm going to play some background footage. This is available on YouTube right now. It just got released. I'm going to put this in the background, and I'm just literally going to read from my notes all the major points, all the things that I got revealed, and I'll give you my thoughts and any important information to go through. Right. Starting off the bat, things that were revealed. There will be enemy AI under UESC, which is the Unified Earth Space Council. This is from original Marathon lore. So go watch my series on the lore, but we will be fighting against them. They'll be in the world space. There'll be different like tiers of them. Some of them will be like more heavily armored, all that kind of stuff. What you would expect from an extraction shooter, there are usually other enemy AI around. That will be the case. We are on the planet Tau Ceti 4. We also kind of predicted that as well. There will be factions, very, very, very similar to other extraction shooters that you have seen, like Escape from Tarkov. You have like vendors. It sounds very, very similar to the Tarkov like vendor system. Essentially, you have vendors. You got to go do contracts for those vendors. Under that faction name. When you do that, you level them up, and it sounded like you got access to better gear. If you've played any extraction shooter, they all use very similar Tarkov-esque systems where you do bounties for a vendor, level them up, get better gear. You are runners, and so you're mercenaries, so you don't necessarily have an allegiance to any of them. I think you just really the common enemy is a UESC. The gameplay they originally showed looked incredibly, well, I wouldn't say incredibly slow. It looked like Destiny 1 kind of slowness, but the gameplay you're seeing in the background now looked a lot quicker. You'll notice there will be moments of really quick boosting and zooming around, and then like losing your stamina, which I described as heat. Remember, you're like cyborg, or I don't think they call them cyborgs anymore. In the first game, they were called cyborgs, but you know, you're not quite human. You've had your bits and bobs replaced. And you can upgrade your exoskeleton and all your abilities and that kind of stuff. So there definitely looks a little bit faster than some of your other extraction shooters. Moments of being frantic, but you're going to have to pick your moments to activate some of your abilities. The release date is this year, September 23rd, 2025. So September this year. You can sign up and get into the alpha if you don't get a key. You can do that by going into the Discord, which is discord.gg/marathon the game. I'll put the link down below. Go into the text chat that has alpha written in it. Type /alpha into that, and it'll give you a link to sign up once you've agreed to the terms and conditions. You have to be in North America. Well, actually, I think it's just said USA and Canada. Right. Next on the list, weapons do have like alternate fire modes. Runners have certain abilities. We saw some like boosting movements. You'll see a lot with like Dr. Lupo, like kind of using a booster to zoom around. There are world interactions too. You'll find like part of your bounties is going into these facilities, activating something, retrieving something, blah, blah, blah. On the alpha release, there'll be 4 classes of runner: Locust, Blackbird, Glitch, and Void. They have different abilities. Locust is a soldier, Blackbird's like recon, Glitch is agile, Void is stealth, go invisible. These are like your base abilities, but you can build onto it. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a sec. On release, they're planning to have 6 runners, so essentially 6 classes to play around with. You'll be in teams of 3 up to 18 players depending on the map. So larger maps should have 18 players. I don't think they confirmed what the smaller maps would have. The maps in this gameplay looked pretty small when you see the map. If it doesn't show on screen, I'll put the link down below and go check it out. Similar, if you've played Delta Force or even maybe some of the smaller, actually probably similar to the smaller Call of Duty DMZ maps. Don't know. Can't remember. I don't know which one I'm thinking of. I've played a lot of extraction shooters over the last year. Cool. They also talked about factions sponsoring you, which sound very, very similar to how in Tarkov when you're down on your luck and you've got no money and you're out of gear. Because when you die in this game, it is a typical extraction shooter. You die, you drop all your gear, you lose your gear. So you get to a position where you can be very poor, and games need a way of handling that. In something like Escape from Tarkov, you get to play as like enemy AI called scavs. It gives you a default kit. You go in there, you can try and scoop up some loot and get back out. Sounds like they've got a very similar system, which they called faction sponsors. I imagine it's probably on a timer. You get like a kit sponsored. They called it like, I don't know, the base frame, essentially, like, you know, a low tier kit that you could go in without having to like risk money, essentially, and use that to go in. Someone did mention a zone. One of the developers mentioned a zone, but there was no official details, but I did catch it when they said it. So I was like, I wonder if there's a closing zone at all, but it wasn't officially mentioned. Maybe a slip of the tongue. Now, this is probably the most unique feature that I've seen so far. They did talk about build crafting. They talked about how the runners you pick is like your base frame, so to speak, and then you can modify them. You can adjust their resistances to things. So they mentioned how you're not going to like have your arm blown off and have to like patch it back on, but you have other things like toxins or immobilizations, other status effects that you can build up towards. You can have like resistances against status effects. You can have these modifying things called cores. That's my writing. Cores that will change your passive abilities. Cores seem like the main thing that will give you variability in your runners and really change how you might play with them. You can bump up your agility stats and other bits and pieces. They talked about weapon attachments, and there's like higher tiers, which are basically exotics, probably change how the weapon completely functions. Consumables like grenades and what you would expect. And then of course, like loot and valuables, you'll see in the gameplay loop that, you know, when you pick stuff up, things have a value like all these extraction games do, and you sell that to buy better gear when you get out. But it does tell you the value in your inventory system, so you don't have to try to memorize what's valuable and what's not. You can quickly look. Like I said, you also do contracts for other factions, which are just like bounties. You'll have an objective when you go in, for whoever you're trying to build up faction rep for. Okay. The whole aspect of the build crafting between the weapons and your like runner, I think is the most unique part of this game so far, apart from the color palette and the music and that kind of Bungie polish. But everything else at the moment is kind of sounding pretty stock standard for an extraction shooter. Combat is approachable. So they talked about how they might make it a bit more friendly for new players, people who are not familiar with extraction shooters. And this is when they talk about the status effects and not having to take in they use the example of like your limbs being blown off, and like in Tarkov you have different bleeds. You have light bleeds and heavy bleeds, and then you got to, your arm can be deadened and you can put your arm back on with certain like surgical kits. Doesn't sound like that's in the game, but you have these like status effects you're going to have to deal with rather than that. Looking at this kind of gameplay, the sound effects sounded great. The movement looked a lot quicker than the original gameplay that they showed. Looked pretty solid. Once again, you're just going to have to play it and see how it goes. They talked about some secrets. There was a mention of seasonal end game challenges, dynamic events, weather changing. You see a lot of fog and a lot of this stuff, and seasonal stories. They did not really dive into any of that. And that's what I mean. A lot of it is pretty much what you would expect from an extraction shooter with some build crafting in there. And I think the aspects that I would have loved to hear a little bit more about is something that makes it more unique. Dynamic events, bosses, end game challenges, and some seasonal story things. We did get an insane 8-minute seasonal story. Or actually, I don't know if it is seasonal story. They did this reveal cinematic. I'll leave the link down below for this too. And you can have a squiz. Very, very high quality. Right. What are my thoughts? What are your thoughts? I overall was probably hoping to see something that made this stand out from your stock standard extraction shooter. I think the only real hint of that was the kind of the build crafting. I think a lot of the artwork and design does a huge amount of heavy lifting. I like it. Divided opinions in chat whether people like it or not. I quite enjoy it. A lot of extraction shooters are very dark and grey and people hiding in dark corners. That's not the case with this, which is kind of nice and refreshing. Obviously, I'm interested in trying it. I've played nearly every extraction shooter that's ever been available. Little do you know, 5 years ago, I made a separate YouTube channel that was dedicated to extraction shooters, mainly Tarkov. So I have enjoyed extraction shooters in the past, but I haven't played a lot recently. So I'm going to give it a shot. We'll see if it's good or not. I think my main criticism would be I wanted to hear more about these endgame challenges, these seasonal stories, these dynamic events. What I would probably describe as Bungie magic. At the moment, we got a pretty cool looking sandbox, a pretty nice looking game with the Bungie gunplay and a little bit of hint at the build crafting. So I think if you do not like extraction shooters and you've played it before, I don't know if this is going to change your mind. Sign up for the beta, join the Discord if you want to see if you can get into it, and stay tuned, I guess, for more gameplay when it comes out. There you go. Thanks for joining. If you'd like to support the channel, leave a like and a comment. You can just leave the words marathon. All right, see you next time. Bye-bye.